Alrighty, welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're going to let some people get in the door and we'll go ahead and start in a minute or two. Hey everybody, thank you for joining us this Wednesday. We're still letting some people get in the door. It's 10:01. We'll give it about one more minute and we'll start the show. Alrighty, it is 10:02 over here on the West Coast, so we are going to start the show. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We know everyone's got busy schedules, so we appreciate you taking out time to join Winspire and One Cause for this webinar. We are excited to talk all about Giving Tuesday, which falls on December 3rd this year. The one thing I think we all know is it's never too early to start planning your Giving Tuesday campaign. We know it's the end of September, but this is the perfect time to start thinking about this. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and start introducing everyone on the webinar. A little bit about myself. My name is Lou Prisco. I'm the Growth Marketing Manager here at Winspire. Been here since 2018. Prior to coming on board here, I worked for a small nonprofit in Washington, D.C. called Spirit of America. I was there for about a little over 7 years, and I was the marketing manager over there. So I've done Giving Tuesday campaigns for 7 years. I've done social, I've done email. I kind of know what works, what doesn't. So I'm excited to share my knowledge about that with you today. We are joined today by Kelly over at One Cause. Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Lou. Thanks, Jason, for having me. I always love being on the Winspire webinars. I'm Kelly Velasquez-Haig. I'm the VP of Content Marketing at One Cause. I also was a fundraiser myself, so come at this from your side of the table. I was a director of development at a private school in Chicago, so always passionate about figuring out what are the trends and the best practices, and love talking about Giving Tuesday. Excited to share some of the tips and also learn from Lou and really apply that directly to what he's tried and what other things that we're seeing are working out in the industry. Jason, I'll turn it over to you to talk about to give us an idea of your background.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Jason Champion. I'm the Director of Product Development and Marketing at Winspire. I've been in the nonprofit world for a little over a decade and a half at this point, with being a fundraiser, VP of Development, event planner, custodial, because we all know working in nonprofits, you're overworked and underpaid a lot of the time. So you wear many a hats, but I've been through many of Give Day campaigns and have raised a lot of money with just some simple tips and tricks that we're going to be able to share with you guys right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. So just some quick idea of what we're going to cover today. Giving Tuesday 101. We're going to dive into social, email, using images, all these different things that come together for a Giving Tuesday campaign. That's also going to directly tie into Powerhouse marketing tips, things that I have personally learned over the past 7 years, and some cool things that we've seen other people do as well. And then we're going to wrap it up with a quick Q&A. We are excited to hear your questions, so please write them down throughout the webinar, and we will do our best to answer all of them at the end.
Great, and I'll just add, Lou. So one thing that we like to do is to try to build as much interactivity as we can into the webinar. So you're going to actually see us intersperse the question sections throughout. We'll cover a couple topics, then we'll take a break for questions. So as things come to you, go ahead and put them into the question panel, not the chat panel, the question panel on your go-to webinar. And then as we get to them, we'll come through, we'll field a few questions, and we'll move on to the next section.
I love that. Yeah, strike while the iron's hot.
Fantastic. Well, at Winspire, we're the largest provider of bucket list travel experiences to nonprofits to assist in your fundraising. So we have a little over 200 different products that are of five-star travel, budget conscious, all the way down to DIY. So there's always something that can fit. And when you work with our ECs, they'll be able to customize and tailor what you need for your event to raise the most money for you all, because that is the main job at Winspire, is to continue to help you cultivate those donors.
And then for those who don't know us at One Cause, we were formerly BidPal, and now we're One Cause Powerful Fundraising Solutions. I think one of the things that we like to talk about is, we came to market as a mobile bidding company, and then as nonprofits evolved in their need to use technology in a myriad of ways to support everything that we do as fundraisers year-round. We've been there with Text to Give now, peer-to-peer fundraising, online fundraising, and obviously Giving Tuesday and year-end fundraising, a huge component of how do we use technology to help us reach more donors. So again, thank you, Winspire, for having me on today, and let's go ahead and let's jump in. I'm going to cover a little bit. Always what we like to do on our webinars is give a little bit of a high-level thought leadership around what's going on in the industry, what are the trends we're seeing, and then really apply it, in this case, to Giving Tuesday marketing best practices. But one of the things that we're seeing over the course of the last decade, and especially in the last 5 years, is these changing donor expectations. As the rise of social media, the rise of technology have come in, and more people using their phones every day, not just to communicate, but to become consumers and ultimately also to become philanthropists. We're really seeing the landscape around donations change. And there's this whole new group. We just did a research study last year of what we're calling social donors, those that give to events or they give to social or peer-to-peer based fundraising. And what donors are telling us is they expect a different experience. Really what they're looking for, regardless if you're talking to them about your gala or your auction, or you're talking to them about your run, walk, ride, or your peer-to-peer virtual campaign, or you're talking to them in this case about Giving Tuesday, is they really want three things. Three things are driving their giving behavior these days, and that's ease. Making giving easy for people, its mission and impact, having them understand. We're going to talk about a lot about this today and how you carry this through your Giving Tuesday campaigns, but they need to feel connected to the mission and they need to understand the impact of their gift. And no longer are the simple give now going to work. They're really wanting something deeper and more meaningful. And they also want a social connection. They want to understand through their friends and their social networks who's involved in what and how they can get involved. So really just a changing landscape out there of how and what's driving donor expectations. With that is the huge surge in the importance of social networks. Really what people are saying to us in the study we did, again, we surveyed 1,056 social donors, and they told us that the three ways that they hear about giving opportunities are in person. This is their friends, their networks, their colleagues, their relatives telling them about a giving opportunity, in this case about a Giving Tuesday campaign. They're hearing also predominantly on social media, and we know that's true. I mean, everybody's on social now, for hours on day. And then they're also hearing about that through email. So the top three things we need to keep in mind when we're constructing a campaign, and in this case, a Giving Tuesday campaign, is how can we use in-person networks? How can we be leveraging social media to its maximum? And then how can we be converting and communicating with people on email? Now, that's not to say that the myriad of other ways that you see on that box on the right aren't still important. But when we build the pillars of our Giving Tuesday campaign, really be thinking about how do we use some social networks and how can we reach people on social and through digital channels. We also, which I always think is fascinating, ask them directly. Now, this is not transactional data in the fact that we've taken data and we're reporting it. This is them telling us specifically what motivates them to give. And the top 5 motivators, as you can see here, and I'm going to focus on the top 3, again, easy to do. They said, I have to care about the mission. I have to be connected. Your messaging has to be able to draw them into your cause, which we'll talk about more. And that they have to understand, again, impact statements. Where's my gift going? How is it going to make a difference? And first-time donors which is what one of the groups that we all really is kind of a holy grail of giving, especially around year-end fundraising and Giving Tuesday. First-time donors are saying, you have to make it easy for me, and you have to help me connect to what you're doing on a human level. So really, what we're going to talk about today is how can you use social media, how can you use marketing and promotion to really get a better participant experience so that can help nonprofits grow your Giving Tuesday campaign. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about Giving Tuesday 101. Let's set the stage for some of the practical advice that Lou and Jason are going to talk about in just a few minutes. We all know, I mean, it's been in the news, it's been everywhere, the rise of Giving Tuesday. You know, this one day, 24 hours for people to give, you know, over $400 million raised last year, you know, about, you know, 14 billion social impressions. So just this huge push, this huge rallying cry for nonprofits around Giving Tuesday. And I think in talking to, you know, nonprofits from all over the country, what they're saying is, you know, help me make the most of it. I don't have a ton of time, don't have a ton of people on my team. So how can I make the most of Giving Tuesday? And that's what we're going to talk about today, because really making the most of Giving Tuesday starts with how you market, how you promote, and how you engage people in your campaign. So we'll talk a little bit on this webinar about how you're going to stand out. What are some practical tips, Powerhouse marketing tips to stand out? Lou's going to be able to share a lot of what he did when he was doing the direct campaign management for Giving Tuesday. We'll talk a lot about connecting, and we'll talk about engagement. And these are all tied together. You have to stand out, but you think about it, you've got probably 2 seconds when somebody's looking at your campaign on their phone or on their computer in order to not just stand out, but make that connection and then draw them into your campaign. And really talk a lot about maximizing social media. There's so many channels. I spend a lot of time on my daily basis looking at our channels, but understanding how to get the most of it so that we're not just using the same ideas and the same strategy across Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, but that we're being thoughtful and intentional about how we're attracting and promoting our campaign on social media. And with that, let's just see real quickly if there's any initial questions. All right. I think, nope, Danielle, we've got, Danielle just wanted to let us know she's here, so that's awesome. Thank you. Anybody
Welcome,
has any
Danielle.
questions? Yeah, welcome, Danielle. Type them in. If you want to just tell me where you're calling in from, just to get used to using the question bar, feel free to do that. But I think we're good. Let's go ahead and move into the meat of the webinar. Lou, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you and share some of those Powerhouse marketing tips.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. So we are going to start off with a quote actually from one of my favorite people, Seth Godin. He said, "People do not buy goods and services. They buy relations, stories, and magic," which is so true, right? Like as a nonprofit, like the big takeaway here for me is the relations and the stories. It all comes down to storytelling and explaining your mission and showing the impact that the dollars raised is actually going to have. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. We're going to kind of dive into that here in a second. And we're going to start off with tip number 1, which is connect to your mission. So here is what we're trying to do with Giving Tuesday is really show what you as an organization is trying to accomplish with your Giving Tuesday campaign. Right? There's different campaigns you do throughout the year, but Giving Tuesday should have a specific end goal. You should know how much you want to raise and then what you're actually raising money for. So here's where, right, you can see tip 1 through 7, the different areas of how to connect people to your mission. So number 1, humanizing your message, I think is so important, because here you don't want to just talk about how much money you need and what you're physically going to do with that money, but they want the backstory. I kind of want to know, what are you raising this money for? You need to humanize it so you could use your messaging to kind of pull at the heartstrings of people and paint a picture and use storytelling to say, hey, we need $20 to buy X, Y, and Z, and here's why. Here's the backstory to it. So I'll use an example. I worked for a nonprofit called Spirit of America, and what we did was we were an NGO, so we were completely privately funded, and we worked with the U.S. military overseas. So we supplied these military teams with whatever it was that they needed while they were on the ground to help with their mission. So if they were in Iraq and they were working to stop ISIS, and they needed tourniquets for their Iraqi army partners, right? It's funny, it's a tourniquet. It's something that doesn't really have much of a story, but there's a lot of backstory to it, what those tourniquets did, what donating money to buy those tourniquets kind of helped build goodwill with the U.S. Army team on the ground and their partners. There's a lot more to it. So explaining that and kind of using images and talking about the impact is really going to help you in your Giving Tuesday campaign. So that kind of leads into number 2. We're talking about impact, not X amount of money raised. So what is the impact of buying these tourniquets for these Syrian army partners of ours? Well, the impact is it helps build goodwill. It makes our US soldiers safer while they're there on the ground. And we're able to kind of demonstrate that and use images to get our message across. Number 3, simple language. This is so important because everyone here gets 20 emails a day in their inbox. Anything over like 2 paragraphs is just too much to read. So when you're promoting Giving Tuesday, it's so important to use simple language, get to the point of what you're trying to say, and use images to help tell your story. Obviously, you gotta, right, if you're on social, you're gonna have text. If it's an email, you're gonna have text. But don't overdo it because people are flooded with so much information every day. The more simple it can be, the better. Show people, number 4, is the most important. Images are key to any marketing campaign that you're gonna do. And for images, my one piece of advice is try to use real images that your organization has gotten over the years. People could tell when you use stock photos or if you're using a generic photo. So it's important to try to show people your mission through actual photos that you've gotten. And one pro tip, something that I picked up a few years ago and it's really saved me countless times, is a website called Canva. And that's canva.com. It's really cool for editing photos. They have some photos you could use. You could add text to it. You could format it for Facebook, Instagram, email. It makes your life a lot easier. Next is using emotive language, right? You want to use words and explain things that is going to draw out the emotions of people. It's important the way you kind of talk about your mission. Number 6, state your goals and dates. This is very important because you want to create an urgency with what you're doing, right? Giving Tuesday, you can start your campaign a few weeks earlier and start promoting it. But Giving Tuesday has hard end date, right? The end of December 3rd, Giving Tuesday is over. So you want to let your supporters know, hey, our goal is to raise $16,000 this Giving Tuesday. And here's exactly what we're going to do with that $16,000. Here's all the things that it's going to affect. And share your progress with people. Something I did a lot was throughout Giving Tuesday, we'd post thermometers or updates of, hey, we're at 4,000 of our 16,000. Like, thanks to everyone who has donated so far. But it helps kind of push that sense of urgency that is there. And then CTAs, which stands for call to actions. You need a call to action for everything that you do. So if you're sending out emails, make sure there's a pretty button that is colorful that is your call to action. The call to action here should be donating to your Giving Tuesday campaign. But just keep that in mind with everything you do has some sort of call to action, and that call to action is noticeable. And then another thing to keep in mind too is call to action placement is very important in social media and email, but what matters most is where you're actually directing them. So if you have a call to action on your Facebook post, you want to make sure that that link is going to lead them somewhere that relates to what they were just reading. You don't want to send them to your homepage or your About Us page because it doesn't really tie into what they're trying to do. So just make sure wherever you are sending them relates to what your messaging is.
And Lou, one other thing that you could add to this to really humanize your message is come up with what your organization's pitch is. If it's a 20-second, 25-second little pitch, do a little video on your phone. You can film it as many times as you want to until you get it down perfectly, and then have that video available that you could drop in an email and send it out, because that humanizes your message, that talks about your impact. You could be in your facility or on site, wherever that you are, the mission work that you're possibly doing, can really take it to a new level and make it completely personal to where people are buying in to that person. Like you said earlier, people buy services and goods from friends and people they know and trust.
Totally.
I think that's a great point. I'll add one thing too that I learned recently at a storytelling workshop. And I thought it was fascinating because in all the years that I've done this, and whether it was fundraising or the social media or content marketing, I'd never thought about this. But the person said, when you're telling your story, when you're trying to make a connection with somebody about your cause or whatever, your campaign, whatever it is you're doing, write to a person of one. And what that means is they literally, like, for a new donor, stick up a picture of a persona, like somebody who you want to communicate to, that message that you want to reach that you've never reached before. And literally, when you're talking to an existing donor, stick up a picture of an actual donor and write your messaging to them, and then take these 7 things and literally check them off to make sure they're in your email, your social post. If you're doing direct mail, make sure that you are writing to an actual human being, that it will crystallize your messaging.
I love that. I think that's so true. And Jason, just to piggyback off of something you mentioned as well, humanizing your message and including video, people need to keep in mind that anyone could create an organic video at your organization. You don't need a big budget. You don't need a fancy camera. Even just using your iPhone or the webcam on your computer is more than enough, because your supporters want to see you. They want to see your face. They want to see you talking about your mission statement, like Jason said. And something I saw a nonprofit do last year, which was pretty cool, was they kicked off their Giving Tuesday campaign with a Facebook Live. So they had like 3 or 4 members of their team all sitting around a desk early Tuesday morning, and they went live and they explained what their mission was and what they're raising money for, and a little background on Giving Tuesday. And they mentioned that they were going to have a donor that said they would match $20,000 of their own funds for Giving Tuesday. So it's kind of a cool way to kick it off. People get to see you, you're humanizing your message, and Facebook Live is free, so why not use it?
That's awesome, Lou. While we're talking about humanizing your message, I think it will be helpful for people to see, the real life example of Spirit of America. Do you want to walk us through some of these posts, and tell us what you're trying to achieve when you put together this messaging to connect people to the mission?
Definitely. So you'll see there's a few different posts here. Some of them. So the first one is kind of making the announcement that all donations will be matched by a generous donor. So it's actually kind of cool. We didn't make that announcement early in the day because we wanted to get as much donations in the door as we could. And then towards the end of the day, we announced, hey, for the next 6 hours, we're going to have your donations matched, which is awesome. So that kind of encourages people to come in, right? You post that on social. We sent a last minute email out to kind of just put it on people's radars. So you can see that's what we did on Facebook here. We also did it on Instagram and LinkedIn and email marketing. And then on the right-hand side, the bottom right, which was one of my favorite things we did, was every hour or so, we would post an update on how much we raised, right? You can see here we raised just over $4,000 of our $16,000 goal. Awesome, right? People know that donations are coming in. We're staying active. We're being transparent, which every nonprofit should be doing. And then the very top one was I think it was the day after, and we let everyone know how much we raised, right? We raised $38,000 from Giving Tuesday, which was awesome. So we posted it on social media, and then a few days later, once we allocated all those funds and used it correctly, we sent out a follow-up email thanking all the donors and telling them, hey, here's exactly where your money went. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's great. And I think the imagery just reinforces the message. You've got, people, faces, eyes, smiling, everything connected back to what you're raising funds for. All right, let's jump into tip number 2, consistent social engagement.
Yes. So social media, it's still one of those things, especially for a nonprofit. You're constantly trying to figure out how often do I need to post? What is the best time? There's all these different things that go into it. But when we are looking at a Giving Tuesday campaign, you want to post daily leading up to it. I think we started 2 weeks before. Obviously, you got Thanksgiving kind of right in the middle of it, right before. But you want to just get people aware of what's going to happen on December 3rd. So we encourage everyone to post daily. The day of Giving Tuesday, there's no limit on how often you could post. You could post every 10 minutes, every hour, whatever you'd like, because it's social media, right? It pops up on people's timelines and then it's gone. So it's good to keep that active and just continually updating your supporters on, hey, here's where we're at. Hey, we've raised 2,000, or here's a reminder of our mission and what we're raising funds for. You want to use creative hashtags. That is so important when we're talking about campaigns. Using the Giving Tuesday campaign is very important, but it's also cool to go ahead and create your own hashtag. One, it creates an archive. You can always look back at, oh, what did we do for Giving Tuesday last year, right? We have our own unique identifier, our own unique hashtag that we could look up. But it also helps other people find your profile. People look up Giving Tuesday hashtags all the time, and if something catches their eye, they'll click on it, and hey, you might have a new supporter directly from that hashtag. So it's important to keep in mind everything you're posting should include hashtags. Building a theme is important as well. You don't want to be all over the place. You want to pick a theme for your Giving Tuesday campaign. Something I saw, I think it was 2 years ago, really stood out for me, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the organization. They did a little play on words and they called it Giving Shoes Day instead of Giving Tuesday. What they did was they had a shoe drive and they collected women's shoes that they would then donate to a homeless shelter for women that were applying for jobs and going through this program. So it was really cool. They had an awesome theme. They came up with that obviously weeks before, and then that theme allowed them to create imagery and different messaging that was all based off of their Giving Shoes Day campaign, which I thought was pretty cool. That also ties into recruiting influencers. When it comes to Giving Tuesday and pretty much any marketing campaign that you're doing for your nonprofit, you want people sharing your information. You want them sharing your post, creating their own post, right? Because 4 people tweeting or posting on LinkedIn about something is a lot better than 1. It just expands your reach. And something we forget to do, I think I started doing this in 2016, was 1, make it not mandatory, but ask everyone in your organization to post it, right? Like it's easy, even the accounting department, whatever, volunteers, just send an email out. You could provide them with some sample text and images that they could use, but just make sure before you ask others outside of your organization to talk about it, that your entire office is involved and is posting as well. And then CTAs, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but everything you do should have a call to action involved in it. you want to inform your supporters about what you're raising money for, but you want to give them an easy way to donate, to share that post with friends and family, whatever your call to action is.
Great. I think I would like to add one thing. So we made a point earlier about post as often as you want. I would say the only exception there, and this is us having learned it the hard way, is don't do that on Instagram, because the way the algorithm works is you'll clog people's feed, and so you really just want to have a slightly different tact if you're going to be those venturing into the world of Instagram for Giving Tuesday today. So just keep that, like how often you post in mind on that particular channel. Jason, anything you want to just add about this tip?
Yeah, one, that organization was dressed for success. So that was the organization Collecting Shoes, Blue.
Yes.
And then second of all, of recruiting influencers, it's always great to have some of your board members as well to be posting on their own social media channels to get the exposure out there. And of course, always include that call to action in all those posts. One other great thing is that, we all use Facebook. Facebook, you can schedule those posts in advance. So sit down and spend about an hour, make sure that you got it together and organized to what you want to do, and then schedule them to go out when you need them to go out. So you're not having to go back and try to think about what to do. Do it all at one time and get it knocked out. That way you stay consistent.
Yes, best use of time. That is a great point.
And I think your point about influencers is such an important point, Jason. Like, if you just take time to figure out who 10 people in your organization, whether they're staff, they're volunteers, or they're donors, you know them because you see them on social media all the time. Bring them into your campaign, give them a role as social influencers, and watch how often they post for you and how all of a sudden you're amplified. And social proof is real. They've proved it in when it comes to charitable donations as well. People like to give to the causes that their friends are associated with. So spend the time to find influencers, and you'll find that they do a lot of the lifting for you.
Yep, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we're cruising on to tip number 3.
Awesome. Tip number 3, it's one of my favorites. Be email conscious. So I love email, done email marketing for a little over 7 years. I've used MailChimp, Constant Contact, HubSpot, a lot of these different email providers. And email is so important when it comes to Giving Tuesday, but that also applies to any campaign your nonprofit is doing. But tip number 1 is extremely important, and you don't want to email people more than one time a week, specifically from your organization. So I would say the only exception to this on Giving Tuesday is it's okay as the day progresses to provide updates of where you are as an organization, and also to thank donors who have already supported your Giving Tuesday campaign. But the weeks leading up to it, you don't want to send an email every day. Giving Tuesday is coming up, December 3rd. It's going to flood their inbox, and as we all know, the inbox is sacred. If you're getting too many emails from whoever it may be, you're going to kind of disengage. You probably will unsubscribe, or you won't read what they're sending. So just be very conscious when you are sending emails. Always emailing from a person, not an org. That is huge. So if there's somebody in your organization, you want that email to come from them with their name. You don't want to use a general email, or you don't want it going to a no reply, because again, you're trying to be human, and emails are more likely to be read if it comes from a human being. Again, kind of ties into that, including a name and signed by a person. What we used to do is we'd send a lot of emails out from the president and founder of our organization. Sometimes we'd make it look like it was a handwritten letter that he would actually write out, and we would scan it and he would sign it himself. It was just really powerful coming from the founder of the nonprofit. It also shows that they're included in the day-to-day stuff, and it holds a lot of weight. Focusing on the Giving Tuesday and your mission, this kind of ties into what we said earlier about having a goal and a theme to your Giving Tuesday. It shouldn't be all over the place. Your emails need to focus on what exactly you're raising funds for on Giving Tuesday and where that money is going to go. Getting creative with subject lines is one of my favorite things to do. I recommend everyone, if you use MailChimp or Constant Contact, they give you the ability to do A/B test. So you can test out different subject lines and see what works, what doesn't. Something I was hesitant about for a while, but actually works really well, is including emojis in your subject line, because one, it stands out, right? It's got color, it looks cool when it pops up in your inbox, and it's people are more likely to click on it. Another cool tip that we found out was including a question as your subject. Just having a question mark really draws people in. You have to get creative with it, but figure out what works best for you. Even if you do a quick search online of like Giving Tuesday email subject lines, you'll find blog posts that have hundreds of examples. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. And then the PS is a great place for a call to action. I love PS. I do the postscript in most of my emails that I send, even to my coworkers. I don't know what it is, but something just stands out about a PS. It seems very personal. You could tell somebody wrote that themselves, and it's a good way to kind of sneak in your call to action towards the end of your email. And before we go into the next tip, I know a lot of these ideas we're talking about apply to both email and social media. But for me and in my experience, I noticed a lot of our return, a lot of the monies raised actually came directly from our email campaigns, because we knew with email we were kind of reaching our database of existing donors and people that are highly engaged in our mission. Social media, it's a little harder to track the return and the direct money raised from social media. So just keep that in mind. Social media is very important because you need it to always promote what you're doing. But from my experience, timely emails were the biggest money maker for us in terms of Giving Tuesday.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think you definitely need the 1-2 punch. You're right that email tends to be the converter, is what we like to say, where they actually take action and convert or activate. You still need the social media to build that awareness, that general, big, broad swath, here's what we're doing, and then drive them to action through it, whether it's email or a direct mail campaign. I'll add one thing, and then I want to hear what Jason has to say. Subject lines, and this is me as with the marketing hat on, nonprofits, I don't think we spend enough time thinking about our subject lines, but again, you've got very little time, whether, you've got 24 hours in Giving Tuesday, but you've got very little time to grab attention. Spend time on your subject lines. And if you do a search on free subject line tools, you can find a ton of free subject line testing tools out there that'll let you know and help you optimize your subject lines. I'd also say HubSpot, although it's written for businesses, nonprofits, I would go check out the HubSpot blog. They have a ton of really great tips around email optimization, subject lines, CTAs, all of that stuff. HubSpot's an amazing source.
I agree with what both of you guys are saying, but I also want to remind everyone to make this personal. Don't forget that people like you, like your mission, and they're donating to you again. And that is the common theme that runs through all of this, of making it personal. Add in that PS, like Lou just said, but then put a link into a video of like Eye of the Tiger. Like, we're getting pumped up over here and we're raising money. Let's do this. Let's do this together. So throw in those little personal touches, and it will go a long, long, long way with your donors, because then they feel much more included into the conversation when you guys are reaching out to raise money.
Yes, that is so important, and something just to kind of piggyback off of that. People forget, but email is so important after Giving Tuesday is over. You need to use email as a way to thank your donors for supporting and then sharing your success. And every Giving Tuesday, there's a handful of organizations that I support. And one of them in particular last year sent a follow-up email. It was very personal, kind of like what Jason was saying. And they included a GIF of this kind of like a boomerang video of the entire staff kind of jumping up for joy and celebrating, and somebody was holding a thermometer with how much they collected on Giving Tuesday, which is pretty cool because, again, it's a good excuse to see all the faces of the people behind the screen, the people that are running these campaigns, and it's a cool way to just show the excitement of the work you guys are doing.
And I think what we might do, just in the interest of time, Lou and Jason, is you all will get access to this deck. We can save this top tips. You all can go through it and have it as a handout. But we have a ton of questions, so I want to make sure that we get to the question portion of this, which is just in time. I'm going to go ahead and, we have a lot, which is great. I can send these to you guys afterwards as well. But we have a question here from Angela, who wants to know, how do you get an existing donor or potential donor to support the mission rather than supporting individuals? Many of her donors give in support mainly of her or because they trust the staff or the mission of what's going on. How can you move donors more towards a mission-centric giving?
I would recommend I think storytelling is really what comes out. Like every nonprofit should have obviously multiple of these, but you need one story that you can share. This is the story you share right at the bar with somebody, or if you run into somebody at the store and they ask about what you guys do, you want to give them a mission statement, but you also want to tell them just a story that kind of ties everything together and really shows how important the work you're doing is. and just try to get that across to them. It's great that they trust you and the work that you're doing, but using images and videos and these type of testimonial case studies about, hey, here's the impact that our organization had on this individual. Jason and Kelly, I don't know if you guys have.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer. Yes, our email works, images and things like that works, but I also believe that people should understand it, live it, breathe it, and touch it and feel it like you guys do on a daily basis. I would suggest opening your doors and letting these donors come work with you for a day to see what the mission may be, if it's feeding homeless or raising money to support women's initiatives, LGBT rights, anything like that. Let them see what you do to get them bought in, because then they can formulate their own type of elevator pitch per se that they can then give back to their crowd, their friends, their audiences that they have in front of them that you're not able to. Because what we do, we all work in a very personal industry. We have to have personal relationships with these people to get them to give the money to us. So therefore, having those kind of open door policies where they can come in and work with you, I think to me has been one of the most successful things I've done as a nonprofit fundraiser.
Yeah, I say here to both of those. And one other thought, there's if you feel like your donors have a personal attachment to you, or you're a big reason why they give, whether that's trust or personal relationships or long-term cultivation, there's no reason you can't also be a part of the campaign. And I've seen a lot of nonprofits do this very effectively when they say, here's me, Kelly, giving my personal appeal as to why I'm involved, or what I see on a daily basis behind the doors, or how the mission makes a difference. And writing that in a way that the mission is still forefront, but you're the one who's voicing its importance. Okay, I have a question from Lane. Jason, I'm going to kind of throw this to you. It's a super interesting one. She wants to know, okay, so her cause raises funds for lung cancer research. And so how does she balance that with the fact that also, lung awareness month is in November? Have you ever seen, or both of you seen, anybody who's piggybacked that effectively? And layer on that, how do you also do that when your big gala's coming up and you're going to turn around and ask them for their support on the gala. How do you balance all of those?
Woo, Elaine, you're busy. Congratulations. It all piles up at one time, right? That we work so long to promote, plan, and execute, and then it all happens in one flash and it's gone. One thing I've seen is we can go back to the conversation earlier of creating those hashtags that are personal to the organization. I've seen many of organizations that have back-to-back events, from a golf tournament to a black tie gala to a walk, and then right into Giving Tuesday, where they had continual, consistent branding throughout the entire thing and just kept that energy high. As we all have to have when we get on that floor to start talking to our donors and our silent auction bidders and our live auction winners, we have to make sure that we have that energy, and being able to keep that consistent message all the way through. I've seen people be successful with their continual picking a theme and working through all the way with it.
Great. Okay, we'll take one more question, and then we'll move to the next session so we can get through the next two tips, and then hopefully we can cover the remaining questions at the end. But Kirsten wants to know, when we say talk about impact but not money, are you suggesting that we don't include ask amounts in our personal solicitation? I'll go ahead and answer quickly for mine, and then I'll throw it over to you. No, I think for me, it's not that you're not asking for money. When you're talking about impact, you're not just asking for a set dollar amount without explaining what that dollar is going to go towards. So the most effective campaigns I see, they're like, for a $20 donation, that will feed, a family for one day. And for $50, you can, help X number of animals. And so that you're making an equation between the dollars that they're giving and the direct impact that it's having.
Agreed. Just to piggyback off of that, something that we would do as an organization is everything had a dollar amount and then exactly what that would buy. So like $20 would buy a tourniquet, $100 would help rebuild a music school in Ukraine's war zone, $402 could pay for one veterinarian's salary for a vaccination campaign we were doing in West Africa. So like everything, right? It wasn't $50, $100, $200. These were actual dollar figures that we were spending with the Giving Tuesday campaign money. So just make it tangible, make it real, and be transparent with where those funds are going.
Great. All right, let's move into matches and challenges, because I think when you are faced with a daunting 24-hour fundraising sprint, leveraging matches and challenges is such an effective thing. And I saw that you guys did that in your social posts. Why don't you talk a little bit about this tip, Lou?
Yeah, definitely. So something we did was, I think it was probably about a month before Giving Tuesday, we spoke to a few different donors that were very close to our organization to see if anyone was interested in being our matching gifts donor for Giving Tuesday. So we explained to them, one, where that money was going to go, but also we had a set amount. So let's say Joe Schmo put $10,000 and said, I will match all gifts raised to $10,000 on Giving Tuesday, which was great because that gave us some ammunition in our back pocket to use that halfway through Giving Tuesday to kind of send an email and do a Facebook post like, hey, just in, right? An anonymous donor is going to match all gifts for the rest of the day. So somebody knows if they're donating $20, that's really turning into a $40 donation. And that's just really powerful, kind of helps drive that sense of urgency and makes it exciting at the same time.
Yeah, I would also say too, I was talking to somebody at our Raise conference last week in Chicago. We were talking about just matches in general and how do you go about, because I think one of the problems for nonprofits is they were like, I don't know where to get a match. Look at your sponsor. I said, so how do you do this? How are you so good at it? And she was like, I look at my sponsors for my other events and I go to them with this additional opportunity for visibility around Giving Tuesday. set up a match, or go to my individual donors, my top individual annual fund donors, and I ask them if they want to either give a certain percentage of their annual gift towards the Giving Tuesday or on top of it. And both of those have been great cultivation strategies for her to be able to go secure matching gifts for the 24 hours. People love to know that their donation is actually being doubled. So I think for those of you struggling to figure out where you start with matches, start within your own base with your sponsors and from some of your high-end donors. All right, and then I'll just speak to challenges real quick. That's something that we've seen on the social fundraising side here at One Cause is people are getting super creative and they're starting to form teams, whether that's inter-office teams trying to outraise each other on Giving Tuesday, whether they have corporate sponsors vying against other corporate sponsors, individuals, and then picking, a winner, but really getting this idea of creating influencers and ambassadors and turning it into a competition so that at the end of the day, the person who brings in the most donations or has the highest social reach. This works really well when you're doing it in short, focused campaigns, such as Giving Tuesday, because you can really, it's like ready, set, go, and you can really leverage those social networks. So if you've got ways to think about how you can do challenges, board challenges, alumni challenges, classroom challenges, anything you do, people love the spirit of competition, especially when it's going to something that's as deserving as your mission. Okay, last tip, and then we'll have just a few minutes left to take some of those final questions.
Awesome. All right. So tip 5 is leveraging your ambassadors. So again, this is kind of what we talked about earlier of starting within and making sure your organization is doing their best as individuals to promote this campaign, but also highlight a few other people that are very close and involved to your mission and ask for them to post on your behalf or send an email out to their supporters or just talk about it in conversation. Something we did was we worked very closely with a retired 4-star general in the US Army, and he was on our board, or ended up being on our board later on. And we asked him, hey, could you post on our behalf? And his response was, how? Like he just didn't know how to do it. So we created these different templates and Facebook text and email text and gave it to him, and he sent it out, and we got hundreds of new eyes on our mission. And of course that translated to new donors as well. So just keep your eyes open, think about people you could have do the promotion for you. Creating a campaign is important, right? This campaign would be Giving Tuesday. Social toolkit is kind of what I just went over, images and different sample text. If it's Twitter, have something that's 150 characters, whatever their minimum or maximum limit is. Just tailoring everything to the different social channels you're using. Using video and personal appeals. I love video. Facebook Live, go on Instagram Live, turn your webcam on and share an update, tell people what the funds are being used for, right? There's really no wrong in doing video. So try a few different things and see what works. As Kelly was mentioning earlier, launch a competition. Everyone likes to compete. Gamification has become really big in marketing, and creating a game or some sort of competition for people to be like, hey, I raised $500 with my network, or hey, I raised 1,000. It's a good way to get people involved. And then watch the proceeds soar. Right? If you're doing all these different things, you will see money coming in for your organization.
Great. Okay, we have so many questions, so we are going to try to get as many as possible. Okay, Robin wants to know, her challenge is she's having a hard time getting photos. And so when she gets them, they don't have any people in them. Do you have any suggestions about how she might either get photos or have another visual way to reach people without photos?
Yeah, my recommendation, that's always going to be a struggle, is either just getting photos or getting quality photos. The thing that helped me was just communication, and that's not going to work for everyone. But I had a team of 5 guys that were in the field. They'd be traveling all over the world, and the last thing on their mind is, oh, let me take pictures for emails and social media. So I would have to constantly remind them and give them requirements of, hey, here's what I need. I need a picture of someone handing this to somebody or somebody trying on this backpack, right? Give them requirements and do your best to get the photos that you need. And if you can't do that, then I think the second best thing you can do is use video and use personal videos of you and everyone else in the nonprofit talking about the impact of the work you guys are doing. If you don't have images with people's faces in it that you could use, then right, that's your turn to kind of step up and become the face of what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, I'd also say if you can get drawings. I mean, I don't know the type of organization, Robin, that you're in, but I've seen a lot of really impactful campaigns that simply use drawings, whether they're of patients, from children, what have you. Okay,
Yeah.
I have a question out there that we'll answer on this side, and then I want to make sure we get it to a couple more. So we had a question out there about how many times is recommended to post on Instagram. And actually, I have Blair here who does social media with me, and she's going to come give a quick, super quick answer. Instagram is far more complicated than you think, so we're going to try to boil it down quickly.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
like Kelly said, the Instagram algorithm is really tricky just because it depends on who your followers are and what their feeds are looking like. So I would say if I had to put a parameter around it, I would say probably no more than 2 posts to your feed within 4 hours of each other, so nothing closer than that. But then outside of your feed, it's a great way to utilize Instagram stories, and making those super interactive will also bring the post that you post to your feed higher for your followers to see and interact with your Instagram channel.
Thanks, Blair. Instagram is something we're spending a ton of time on. If you want to follow us, you can go to One Cause Team on Instagram and see it. We're playing a lot with stories and feeds, and I will be the first to say learning a lot along the way. So feel free to piggyback off of our lessons learned. We have one more question out there. What if we have 2 different campaigns happening in a month? Like I mentioned before, is one email still too much?
It's good to be concerned about that, and I know Giving Tuesday falls right after Thanksgiving, and then before you know it, it's the end of year, so everyone's doing an end of year push. But one email I would say isn't too much. You just need to make sure you are timing them correctly and that the asks are unique, right? Your Giving Tuesday campaign should have a unique ask and a unique theme that will differ from your end of year campaign. And the reason you do that is then somebody could continue to donate to both. They would like, they can choose one or the other, but just make sure they stand out. And then you're allowed to send 2 emails about 2 different campaigns because there's really no overlap. That's something that we've done with some pretty good success. Kelly, Jason, I don't know if you guys have thoughts.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think the next question that was interesting, and I want to make sure we get to that too, is when should you announce, and this is by Abby. Abby wants to know, when should you announce your Giving Tuesday campaign and how soon is too soon?
Another great question. So for us, we always announce our Giving Tuesday campaign in early November because for us in our campaign calendar, we didn't have a whole lot going on in early November, but we knew once we kind of got to the mid-November to the end, Thanksgiving pops up. And a lot of people take off for a whole week of Thanksgiving and they come back from Thanksgiving and they're swamped. Their inbox is probably crazy. So if you wait until the last minute, your chance of your email falling in the pile of 100 other emails really increases. So we started early November. We put 1 email feeler out there and I think 2 or 3 social posts, just letting people know, hey, Giving Tuesday's a thing. If you don't know about it, here's what it is. And then here's what we'll be doing. Right, right? It just kind of teases them, puts a little feeler out there, and then it makes Giving Tuesday a lot easier of a transition.
Yeah, I'll say too that there's some interesting stats out there. That a small majority start in September. A pretty big swath start communicating in October for Giving Tuesday, and then pretty much an equal swath start in November as well. So it depends. I would say look at the competition in your area. Look at the competition for similar causes or who's also tapping into your donor base, and when they're going out with their campaign. And you might want to go out a little bit earlier if you can. All right. I want to make sure, actually, that we get to one more question. How many people can send an email? I think this is around the social influencers. How many people do you kind of target or can that you try to find to send emails on your behalf to their friends?
I would recommend as many as you can. I think that's going to differ between each person and organization, but it's really as many people you have in your network that have a good reach, right? You want to start big, cast a large net and see who has interest in sharing it, because it might be 2 people or you might have 30 people respond and be like, yeah, this is awesome. I would love to share this with my network. And like Jason said and Kelly said earlier, starting with your board, starting internally, and then working out from there. That's my recommendation.
Great. Well, we still have a ton of questions, so maybe Jason and Lou, we can share the questions amongst ourselves and make sure that we can get answers back to people that still have some outstanding questions. So there's some good questions out there. Lou, I'll let you go ahead and wrap this up.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys again. I know, right, it's almost October, so everyone is getting ready to start promoting their Giving Tuesday campaigns. I really hope some of the information we provided will help you out. Jason and I are actually going to send a follow-up email, hopefully shortly after this, and we will get to every question that did not get answered. And I know Kelly will as well. So we'll cover that. And if you guys have any specific questions outside of what you asked today about Winspire, about Giving Tuesday, about an upcoming event, whatever it may be, let us know. We both, all of us, all 3 of us have a lot of experience in the nonprofit world, and we'd love to help you guys out however we can. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. We always have so much fun doing these webinars with you.
Absolutely. Thank you both to you and Jason for including me. I think it's a great topic and a great time to start talking about it.
Let's go raise some money.
Woo! Woo! Happy fundraising.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.